A huge warm welcome to Art Gallery Explorer, the vlog that explores the art scenes of London, the southeast of England, and sometimes beyond as well. Today I'm super pumped to be visiting my 7th most anticipated show in London of 2024. This is at the Royal Academy and it's entitled In the Eye of the Storm, Modernism in Ukraine 1900 to 1930. This exhibition obviously would not have happened in its current form without the ongoing tragedy resulting from Vladimir Putin and Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine and the horrendous war that's unfolded there, because the basis of the show is made up of loans from Kyiv's National Museum of Art. And so we have to remember that it's going to be a highly charged experience for me as I go inside and visit these artists. But I also hope that it's kind of like a form of resistance, a second front, if you like, of cultural solidarity with Ukraine. And on top of that, this isn't just a tokenistic visit. It's in my most anticipated shows of the year, because I'm expecting to see some well-loved modernist names like Malevich and Sonia Delaunay, who are Ukrainian masters. And also, modernism means so many things. It can mean cubism, futurism, expressionism, constructivism, and so abstraction even. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how Ukraine's artists managed to integrate these radical art forms into a Ukrainian context. The show's on until the 13th of October. It's £17 to get in. So let's go inside the Royal Academy and explore modernism in Ukraine 1900 to 1930. The exhibition begins by reminding us of the complex history of Ukraine. At the end of the 19th century, parts of what we know today as Ukraine were found in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and other parts were found in the Russian Empire. And Ukraine had been a country that had been ruled by outsiders for a long time. And when we think about Ukrainian art, we're reminded that there was an array of different influences. There was obviously Ukrainian art and folk art and traditions from the country, and these fused with Russian art, Polish, Yiddish art, that all came together at different points to create Ukrainian art. And the modernism that this exhibition focuses on came about at a time of astonishing change. Obviously, the build-up to the collapse of the Russian and Austro-Hungarian empires, World War I, the 1917 revolution, a brief period of Ukrainian independence between 1918 and 1921, before the country was subsumed into the USSR. The exhibition points out in the Cubo-Futurist section that when Ukraine was ruled by the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Russian empires, its own cities were not allowed their own art schools or academies. And so Ukrainian artists were forced to look north to St. Petersburg, but also increasingly west to cities such as Paris and Munich. And Ukrainian art was influenced by movements that came about in those cities, such as post-impressionism, cubism, and futurism. You can see some of those influences in these works. But the artist also looked back to their homeland and adopted the colours of Ukrainian folk art and some of the themes as well within their work. One of the most exciting, and for someone like me who does not know a lot about Ukrainian art, unexpected sections of the show was this one on theatre design. I didn't know that in the 1910s, Ukraine experienced a revolution in theatre production, and that artists were at the forefront of that, with Alexandra Exter bringing in cubist and futurist principles to stage and costume designs. And as Ukraine fought for independence and the country experienced a brief flurry of freedom, she set up a private studio in Kyiv with courses in stage scenery. Several formidable artists, including those who you can see here, were her students, and they were given an outlet by Les Kurbas, himself a theatre director, who produced radical productions within both Kyiv and Kharkiv, using some of the spectacular designs that you can see here. These works actually look so much better in the gallery than they do on this vlog, so if you can get along, it's really worth doing so. The Kultur Lige was founded in Kyiv in 1918 to promote Jewish Yiddish culture, and it aimed to synthesize the Jewish artistic tradition, which went back centuries in Eastern Europe, with the booming European avant-garde that was spreading east from cities like Munich and Paris. It's a really interesting but small part of the exhibition. Artist Rybak, who you can see here, used radical art to depict the culture and daily life of Jewish people, whereas Sarah Shaw survived pogroms in northern Ukraine to join the Kultur Lige and create modern Jewish art. And it must be said that this was both a time of hope. The period after the end of the First World War from 1918 to 1921 was a period of hope for Jewish people that a modern independent Ukraine would become celebratory of multiple religious faiths, but also a time of great danger, with pogroms attacking Jewish communities in Ukraine and making life insecure. And the art kind of reflects that duality. The war of independence for Ukraine after the end of the First World War was bloody and ended in defeat, with the Bolsheviks defeating Ukrainian forces and setting up the Ukrainian Socialist Soviet Republic with its capital in Kharkiv. Initially, Ukraine was given quite a bit of cultural autonomy once it had been brought into the Soviet Union. I think this was partly to appease Ukrainians who had fought bitterly, losing thousands of compatriots, but also in recognition of the really important role of Ukraine as the breadbasket of the Soviet Union in the Bolsheviks' new country. This autonomy was sometimes in a process called Ukrainianization, and artists began to develop art, which you can see here, which had both Soviet and Ukrainian influences. Kyiv Art Institute was crucial in this period. It was seen as one of the USSR's leading art schools and employed a modern curriculum
including subjects according to the exhibition like industrial design. It was part of the Soviet education system and needed to adapt to become integrated into that. But it employed radical progressive tutors such as Malevich. He returned to Ukraine in 1929, having abandoned abstraction for a more figurative style, as you can see here. Bohomazov also shows how radical influences from earlier in the exhibition can still be seen through really radical use of colour, even if some of the themes, like this one, would be pleasing to Soviet authorities. So you get a sense of a kind of uneasy truce, if you like, between the artists of Ukraine and the Central Soviet Union in Moscow. The last generation reminds us that Ukrainian modernism comes to an abrupt end in the 1930s. Stalin himself was instrumental in making socialist realism the only official style of art allowed in the Soviet Union between 1932 and 1934, and from then onwards any kind of experimentation became very, very difficult. And indeed, many of the artists who you've seen here were persecuted, forced to leave Ukraine, sent to gulags or killed. And Ukraine itself suffered a horrific famine in the 1930s.
I really hope you enjoyed that exploration there of the Eye of the Storm, Modernism in Ukraine, 1900 to the 1930s. I certainly really enjoyed the show, and I always think about the exhibitions that I bring you in terms of the good, the bad and the beautiful. And in terms of the good, I like both the macro, the curation, this attempt to separate Ukrainian modernism from the wider Russian modernism and show it as a distinctive force which was developing in response to historical events. I really enjoyed that, and I think it really worked well. I also enjoyed the getting to know new artists, of which there were many in this show. Take this painting, for example, by Alexander Bohomazov, and sharpening the saws. This just blew me away. It was towards the end of the exhibition, and the colours and the combination of these bright, quite radical colours with a quite traditional scene really struck me. And I really also enjoyed the theatre design section, which you can see an example here. I just didn't realise that Ukraine had this heritage and that art was such an important part of designing a new style of theatre for Ukrainians. So that was really exciting. In terms of the bad, there was a couple of little quibbles. I mean, the first one was, it was quite a small show, and I found myself wanting more, especially in the Kultur Lige section, where there was a couple of examples by what to me seemed really interesting artists, and I would love to have seen more. And I would say that not every single piece matched the high standards of lots of the works, but they're just minor quibbles. It was really special to have these works brought over from Kyiv, even though it has been in tragic circumstances. And in terms of the beautiful, this work by Rybak I loved, and this is the one I would take home with me. It reminded me of one of my favourite modernist artists, Hamsutin, who also came from Eastern Europe and had a Jewish heritage, although not from Ukraine. I love the houses kind of collapsing in on each other as he shows the shtetl, this traditional Jewish way of life, in a very modern form, just as this way of life is changing. So I really enjoyed that and had a really interesting conversation with a a fellow art lover and someone who's viewed some of the videos on the channel about this work and others. It was really nice to see them. It made the show even more special. And overall, this was a highly charged show because of the historical context. This show's been travelling around Europe almost nomadically after these works were smuggled out of Kyiv in disguised lorries, and it's been to Madrid, I think Brussels, possibly Cologne as well, and London was its last scheduled stop. But obviously, as I was leaving the show, I was thinking, it's obviously not probably safe for these works to return to Kyiv yet. So will there be another added stop to this show? And when can these works, which so should be at their home galleries, be able to return home to Kyiv? And I did think about the irony as well, that in attacking Ukraine, Vladimir Putin has tried constantly to diminish Ukraine and almost suggest it's not deserving of its status as a country. And these artworks massively rebut that. And I found it incredibly powerful and also ironic that the war in Ukraine has merely strengthened Ukrainian identity and allowed us non-Ukrainians to fully celebrate Ukrainian art and culture in a way that we undoubtedly wouldn't have done if the war hadn't happened. So I don't know what's going to happen in terms of the territorial outcome of the war, but I do know that in terms of culture, Vladimir Putin has had the opposite effect of what he's intended. Do subscribe to Art Gallery Explorer and hit that notification bell, because there's a series of autumn openings over the rest of September and into October, which I can't wait to bring you. Thank you ever so much for watching, as always.